One of the most famous characters out of one of the most famous books in this time of year is Ebenezer Scrooge in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Scrooge is not a good man. He is hung up on money, on making as much as he can to add to the vast hoards of gold he already possesses. And at one point in time, Scrooge had a friend, a colleague, really, Jacob Marley. And we are told emphatically by Dickens that Marley, at this point in time when our story starts, that he is dead as a doornail. And yet, just before Christmas, the ghost of Marley comes to Scrooge and shows him the state that he is in. In his ghostly form, he is weighed down by chains forged with the greed that he possessed in life. And now he tells Scrooge he will be visited by 3 more ghosts this evening. The only hope he has to maybe not live into the same fate, or rather be dead in the same fate as Marley was. And so each of these ghosts come in turn. The ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas future. And they show Scrooge that there is another way. They show him that at one point in time, he did have passion for something other than money. They show him that he could have this same passion again. And they show him the consequences if he is not able to change. So after receiving these visits, Scrooge once again finds that inner joy in him, that inner joy on Christmas Day. He goes out, helps others, spends his money to bring some joy to others, uses it to prepare a feast for his employee who's very much struggling with his family. But Scrooge doesn't get to this point alone. The only reason that Scrooge is able to change, the only reason he has any hope after all that has happened, is because he takes the time. He listens to what the ghosts have to say to him. He truly listens, hears their words, accepts them, and turns his life around to be a better person, to be the better person that he was years and years ago before the weight of his wealth got to him. Now, listening is important. It's a big part of what Advent is really all about. It's also a theme that we see in our readings today. We see it at the very beginning of our psalm, a response to what we hear from the prophet Micah. And it's also a huge part of Mary, of who Mary is, of what her story is. Now, Mary, before we see her in our gospel today, Mary has been told by the angel Gabriel, told that she is going to bear a son, to bear the Messiah, the Christ child, even. Now, the angel begins the words of this message the way angels often begin their messages. Fear not. The message that Mary's hearing is one that would have made her very fearful. Because here she is, a young woman, betrothed to be married. And all of a sudden she's told that she is going to be pregnant. And it's going to be very clear to her betrothed that this is not his child. And in this day and age, Mary could have been put to death for what is happening. So the message the angel is giving her, the message of what God is working in her, is not an easy thing to hear. It is not a message that comes without risk or danger. And yet, Mary, her response to the angel is, "Let it be to me according to your word." This is the response that Mary has. Knowing all the risk, knowing all the danger of what is about to befall her. And not only that, but we have what we hear in our gospel reading today. We hear that Mary gives out a song, a beautiful song, a song we still remember to this day, the Magnificat. She gives a song of great joy about what God is doing within her, about all that is going to befall her, even with all the risk that that entails. Mary does this because she is truly listening. She's truly hearing what it is that God wants to say. She's looking past all the things that would raise our blood pressure, that would induce anxiety, and seeing that this is something special that God is working in her. And that God will keep her safe. That God will be with her all the way through this. Mary's response isn't to reject the angel's message, to take the safer path, the one away from risk. Mary's answer, her response, is to hear, to take in and accept what God is doing. She trusts in the Lord. And that trust is the very definition of faith. That trust, that faith, all coming from her listening. This is what makes Mary worthy. This is the reason that God chooses her in the first place. Her openness to what God is doing, what God is saying in her life. That's the reason that she is the one who bears the Christ child. God in God's fullness, coming down and being one with us. One with all of us as human beings. Her faith is what makes her worthy of this great honor. Again, this listening This is not only what makes Mary worthy, but it's what this Advent season is all about. Advent is a season of preparation. And preparation means making ourselves ready. Making ourselves ready to hear, to take the time to hear what it is that God has to say. And sometimes, as with Mary, what God is saying to us doesn't come without risk. And part of being ready, part of being prepared, is being able to hear what God has to say, to be ready for that risk, to be prepared when God presents whatever it is that God has in store for us. Being prepared means being ready to hear and accept God's call, even though there are risks involved. And doing so because we know that God will be with us every step of the way. Advent may be ending soon, but my hope is that you'll take what you've learned in this season and continue to listen. God is always speaking to us. So we need to take the time to stop and hear what it is that God has to say. As we move forward to the season of the Nativity, my hope is that each and every one of you can be like Mary. To have your hearts open and listening so that we can accept our Lord Jesus Christ into our hearts and hear what it is that he has to say to each and every one of us.